about giving and receiving. The long, narrow balcony of our flat, where Mum had a few pots of flowers and vegetables, was usually a neglected space. But now, during lockdown, it had become our outdoors and been elevated in status to prime real estate. Mum's rule was that we all had to go out on the balcony at least twice a day. 4 times was better, and do our pranayams. A few months ago, going out in the open to make lion faces and close one nostril at a time and do all that crazy stuff, my brother and I would have flatly refused. But nowadays, every balcony and window is full of people of all ages making funny faces, and it's our one and only social opportunity. So we've agreed. We also play badminton on the terrace almost every day. Just the 4 of us. Time slots are provided to each family. Someone strung a cord across at the correct height and marked out a court with chalk, and rackets and shuttlecocks were unearthed and shared across apartments. The 4 of us played or walked about. Gran sat in the sun for a while. Just being out in the open air felt like such a privilege. I was out on that balcony doing deep inhalations, one nostril at a time, and trying to avoid listening to Gran and Mum having their daily morning argument. Gran bemoaning the fact that everybody in the whole world was staying safely at home, including all the presidents and prime ministers, but only her son-in-law had to brave this deadly virus and go out to work. Why couldn't he just work from home like everybody else? He had a computer machine, as she called it. And Mum defending Dad, who'd absolutely refused to step into this meaningless battle, saying he was the one who wanted to go in the first place, so it wasn't good of Gran to bring it up every day, making life difficult for everybody. And then Gran grumbling that no one had any respect for old age anymore. Things were different in her day. But the times had changed, and she had to accept that. She was no use to anybody now, so God should just pick her up to fill his daily quota rather than carrying away young children before their time. The first time she'd said that last in this charged COVID atmosphere, we'd all rushed to assure her that we loved her deeply and wanted her around for many more years, and she was not to talk like that. Now, no one even blinked. We'd heard it too often. It had become a daily ritual. And though we were all used to it, it still fed our anxiety about Dad. So it would be nice if she'd can it. But that didn't look likely. Dad would appear with his mask on, ready to leave, and Gran would summon him. She'd hug him and bless him and pray over him and crack her knuckles on her temples to ward off evil. And he'd be hopping from foot to foot with impatience, but have to wait it out politely. My brother muttered balefully once that he'd never let his mother-in-law into his house if he'd be required to exercise this much self-control. And I hissed back at him that he should be so lucky as to have a mother-in-law in the first place. Which girl would consent to marry him? Dad would be allowed to leave only after all this tamasha. I'd lean out of the balcony, waiting to see him as he exited the building, and he'd look up knowing I'd be there. I'd quickly pull back, but not before he'd wagged his finger at me to be careful and not lean so dangerously. All tiny family rituals, grown out of nowhere and become so much a part of our lives and our comfort zones. So I understood Gran's grumbling at some level, and after Dad left, I often snuggled in beside her, watching her hands as she cut and stitched something or the other. It was the background sound in our house, her whirring sewing machine. She finished one thing and started another. She was very adept and could stitch anything from only a picture. The greatest kindness you could do, Gran, was to ask her to stitch something for you. Mum called out for me. She pointed to 2 parcels of food. Nothing needed to be said. I picked them up, grabbed my mask, and ran off downstairs to give them to the watchman. The larger one was for him, his breakfast. All the apartments in the building had taken the responsibility to ensure he got his 3 meals a day, so that he could stay on the premises and not need to commute home and back every day. It was safer for him and better for us too. And the other parcel was for the crazy lady. One day, during lockdown, we'd heard some loud chatter in the street. Not fighting, just talking and laughing, but loud and inappropriate, which I cringe to say, but yes, it was inappropriate. I investigated. It was a woman, middle-aged, slender, barefoot, a bit messy, but not too much. Obviously unbalanced. So sad, I thought. She ranted at our watchman in a high-pitched voice and gestured angrily at him. He didn't answer back, and ultimately she poured out all her anger and moved on. I went in and told Mum about her. Poor thing, I said. She came again the next day, and the next. And soon enough, it had become her routine to walk down our road, sometimes going up and down multiple times, ranting angrily at our watchman, who was extremely decent and didn't let himself be provoked. She didn't look homeless and must have had a family somewhere, for her saris were bright and clean and wrapped tight around her matchstick figure. But they were probably relieved to be free of her incessant chatter for a while every day. She was noisy, but otherwise harmless. Gran grumbled about the intrusive chatter, not even letting a person pray in peace. Gran was an inveterate grumbler. Mum hit upon the idea of giving the watchman a small snack parcel for her, to see if that would stop her berating him needlessly. The poor man was blameless. So we gave him a packet and explained the plan to him. He accepted it willingly. When she came ranting that day, he came out in the open and offered her the parcel. She refused it at first, but accepted it when he placed it quietly on a chair and retreated. She opened it and took a peek, while I watched the whole drama from the balcony and gave Mum a running commentary. Her face broke out into a huge smile. She scurried across the road, sat herself down on the high pavement, dangling her feet into the road as if seated at a fancy dinner table, and tucked in joyfully. The unexpected treat seemed to be a great delight. As she ate, she chattered loudly and gleefully with our watchman, her new best friend. I called Mum to have a look at how well her plan had worked, and Gran ambled over too. We were delighted to see how easily the poor woman had been pacified. But Gran ticked us off, of course. Encouraging the crazy woman to come here, she may be dangerous. Suppose she attacked someone, then we'd regret it. Mum scolded her mother. Why must you always see the dark side? All she's doing is eating happily. Now don't grudge her that. So the snack parcel became a daily ritual. I handed it over to the watchman, he gave it to her, she ran across the road to eat, laughing and chattering and gesticulating happily throughout. Her laughter was so infectious, you couldn't help feeling cheered up. The shouting had long stopped. Sometimes she came singing unrecognizable snatches of song. She brought a distinct wave of sunshine along with her. Perhaps she was insulated from the current grim reality, but there was a sweet joyfulness about her that was almost therapeutic. I pulled Gran out on the balcony to watch with me. She needed to have her spirit lifted on a regular basis. She was too much of a pessimist. Gran grumbled, of course. But slowly, that woman's innocent joy started reaching in and touching her. She even smiled benignly at her once or twice, and I caught her joining in the singing. They were songs from her vintage. I noticed Gran was becoming less terribly negative. Dad could go to work more peacefully now. And while she still cracked her knuckles over him every day, there was no daily harangue, which led to much less stress all around. The crazy woman comes every day, singing her bits of song, chattering excitedly, and laughing. Every day she opens the parcel to discover what's in it with great excitement. Food is such a basic pleasure. She brings with her a soft, simple light that finds its way into many a dark place, and she's completely unaware of it. Gran gets involved with menu suggestions now too. Not for us, her beloved grandchildren, or for her sainted son-in-law, or even herself, but for the laughing crazy lady downstairs. And I can pinpoint the very day she was completely won over. It was the day she gave me some masks and cotton headscarves that she'd stitched herself. "Give these to her," she said. "She should be wearing a mask. Why has no one given her one? And ask her to cover her head, walking about in the sun like that every day. She'll make herself sick." So nice to know. We are old friends. We've grown up together, gone through school books and college flings together, and more recently, in tribute to Simon and Garfunkel, even sat on a park bench like bookends. He'd fought kids who picked on me, and soon everyone knew that messing with me would incur his wrath. No one understood why, least of all I, for I had nothing to give in return. Oh, I had my areas of strength, but he didn't need my help there. He was quite able to fend for himself. Of course, the obvious conclusions had been drawn, murmured, and even broadly flung at us, but our equally obvious, teenage, decadent, and dissolute lifestyle put paid to those without our having to say a word in our defense. In the eyes of the world, he was the star, and I was his shadow. But it was never that way with us. In our 40s now, I'm still here in the same city, the same street, the same house. And he's made it bigger than big. Dines with princes, owns fleets of fancy cars and private planes, has homes in every corner of the world. Yet, between the two of us, we are always just Riju and Madan. He's made 2 stabs at marriage, and both have ended disastrously. And while I never found a wavelength with either of his wives, he's fully a member of my family. He treats Geeta like a younger sister, and with the kids, he's the favorite uncle, roughhousing with them, patiently listening to their anti-parent rants, steering them through college applications, and providing advice or guidance if asked. He fits into our rambling old home seamlessly, never indicating how different it is from his own everyday life of maids and butlers and assistants. Of course, we've holidayed with Madan, especially when the kids were younger and an endless supply of Coke and chips was their version of nirvana. But more commonly, he comes to us. Randomly through the years and unfailingly checking with Geeta first, he drops in for a weekend. He always receives a hero's welcome, with robust hugs from the boys and Geeta and face washes from the dogs. He's the local boy made good and a legend in the town, where everybody knows him since he was in short pants. His choice of me, not just as friend, but as lifelong friend, perplexes most people. Distasteful comments have been directed at me, and I shrug them off in public. though they have led me to private doubts and self-questionings. Regrettably, Geeta and the boys have been targeted too. Geeta has had the most scurrilous remarks hissed at her. The boys have fought umpteen fistfights defending his honor. Ultimately, we decided that silence was our most honorable recourse. Whenever he comes, the day belongs to the family. Chatting, playing, watching TV, doing odd jobs, lazing. But evenings are for the two of us. We go to a restaurant, watch a local footy game, or join other silent, motionless anglers for a round of night fishing. Or we stay home, lying on the terrace, looking out at the stars. Sometimes we are silent, each deep in his own thoughts. But most often, we talk. A lot. And about everything. Work, worries, joys, the failure of his marriages, and how I keep mine stable, politics, sports and taxes, the boys, the increase of violence and intolerance in the world, gadgets and gizmos, books and movies, going to the moon or to Mars, anything that comes up, anything at all. Our conversations have a staccato rhythm, stopping abruptly at the end of each visit and starting again the next time, but retaining an unbroken melody. We have talked, laughed, fought, consulted, and supported our way through the years. Our lives have taken such different turns that we disagree on many issues. But neither that, nor the contrast between the flamboyant flash of his lifestyle and the steady sameness of mine have impacted the constancy of our friendship. With all his natural talents, his acquired strengths, his fame and his riches on his side, and nothing discernible on mine, our relationship is remarkably even. Of the wealth of money, favor, influence he has, he never offers me a jot, knowing I would not want it, would never accept it, and that the very offer would change our relationship irrevocably. His biggest gift to me is, of course, his time. I have no idea what gift I give him in return. But long ago I'd realized that whatever it was, it must be similarly valuable to him. For golden boy that he's always been, and I'll never be, his friendship has been unwavering. And the one incontrovertible fact in the decades of our adult lives, when the disparity of our circumstances has but grown and grown, is that it's he who seeks my company, not I who presume on his. Geeta waved us off at the front door that evening with joking warnings to us old codgers not to be up to too much malarkey. The boys added their protests that they were so embarrassed by our elderly shenanigans that they'd just stay home and hide their faces. Madan warned them he wasn't quite in his dotage yet. He still had all the muscles in his spanking arm, he threatened. The Eastern Eatery was abuzz with the usual weekend custom. We picked up our drinks at the bar and headed for a booth. It was commonly believed that I jealously guarded his attention exclusively for myself. Certainly no one parked the responsibility at his door where it rightly belonged, for he was as charming as ever to all who stopped by. Still, over the years, folks had become more and more likely to give us our space and leave us alone. The evening passed steadily with food, drink, and endless talk. We were still in the thick of it when a group of youngsters swaggered up to our booth. I recognized them as the latest local gang of minor thugs. They bowed dramatically in an obviously pre-planned gesture. "Divine grace and blessings, Shahenshah." "And blessings on you too, Sarji," he responded good-naturedly. Heads were already turning, and the attention unfortunately encouraged the youngsters. One of the gang curled his lip into a nasty sneer and growled something indecipherable. Another rumbled something about slumming with the locals, Sahibji. But why do you spend your favors only on this unworthy scoundrel? The play had been rehearsed, it seemed, and every man had a part. What has this miserable fellow done to earn Sahib's blessings? Your kindness and riches are wasted on him. Arey boss, the town is full of nobler men than this useless fellow. Yeah, show us the money and we can show you a much better time, can't we, guys? I taught myself to shrug off most attacks, and this one, though addressed to Madan, actually targeted me. Still, it marked a new high in the level of naked jealousy and vituperation. An angry murmur was rising in the restaurant. The unexpected virulence of the attack had driven from my mind the fact that, to Madan, all this was new. People usually behaved decently during his visits, and the smarmy little asides were directed only at me and my family, which we rigorously kept from him. Madan, who'd been silent this whole time, came slowly and menacingly to his feet. I tried to reach out and calm him, but I was blocked by the snickering, shambling members of the gang. And in any case, it was instantly evident that that ship had sailed. This was the first time I truly understood the phrase, the grapes of wrath. The purple stain of throttled fury spread over his face and neck and into the open collar of his shirt. The very hair on his head bristled like the angry ruff of an enraged bear. And towering in height and muscular in build, he was no less terrifying than a wild beast. The bravado ebbed visibly in the idiot boys, and they were rapidly reduced to a blubbering, quivering mass of jelly. Madan's words cracked like lightning in the electric atmosphere. You bloody, foolish, misguided morons! My favors and my blessings! If it weren't for the light Riju shines on my life, there would be none of the riches you so evidently cannot see beyond, and it's moot there would even... He broke off here, sending me a burning glance, the meaning of which I was too dazed to figure. As to nobler men, he continued, visibly calmer and back in control, I haven't come across one yet. Riju's a bigger man than I'll ever be, or you can even hope to understand. So crawl back into your black hole, and that will be quite the best time you can show me. Now beat it! They stayed frozen and immobile. Having silenced them, the crowd in the restaurant, and truth be told, me, he dismissed the gaggle with a peremptory wave of his hand. Through the smattering of applause, he gestured me back to our seats and raised his glass in toast to me. We sipped our drinks with studied insouciance, ignoring all the eyes on us. A warm glow suffused me and drenched me with unspoken delight. I was still no clearer as to what exactly was the nature of the light I brought to Madan's life, or on what I shone it. But to hear him acknowledge it with such patent sincerity and vehemence was a deeply emotional experience for me. It changed nothing, lessened or increased nothing. But it was just so nice to know. Riding the Tiger. I've sat in this chair so much, it's taken the shape of my body, I think. I'm a single man. What do I have to hurry home to? I pass many of the long, lonely hours between close of work and bedtime here. It is, in a way, my favorite place. Some customers prefer the inside room, with its generous, cushiony leather seating. But I find the air too smoky in there. I like the semi-outdoors feel of this room. The small round tables, the straight-backed chairs, the golden light that lifts and lingers around the room, the low-silled windows studded with tea lights and colored glasses, open most of the year, letting in the softness of the night. Yes, I think it is my favorite place. From this chair, I can watch the world, both inside this bar and outside. It's in a business district, though on an inner parallel road, so by late evening, it's the only lively place left on the street. They can play their music as loud as they want, with no one around to complain. Some of the show windows on the street are still lit, but only for security reasons, and all the offices have emptied out their human cargo. Between numbers, you can hear the arriving or departing footsteps echoing in the silent street. The yowls of squabbling street dogs, the occasional siren of a speeding ambulance, and the distant hum of city traffic. The trees outside fill up with yellow flowers in summer. They drop their velvety petals generously in the hot breeze, and the nights are heady with their scent. The music changes from lilting to pounding, and the lights become more staccato as the night wears on. The customer profile changes. The men in suits and ties and the women in knee-length skirts give way to the torn jeans and tight tees crew, jostling and pushing at the counter, impatient, demanding, loud. I know many of the regulars, in the sense that I've people-watched them umpteen times. Like those two girls seated on the high stools. They don't come often, but they stand out because they are such unlikely friends. One's a plain Jane type, and one's a voluptuous seductress. That one's a man-eater, and no doubt about it. Her red talons and tantalizing lips flash a come-hither that cannot be misconstrued. Her clothes are always just a little too tight, her skirt a little too short, except when she plants herself seductively on that bar stool and crosses one shapely stiletto-shod leg over the other, when it becomes way too short. Only her ruby-red smiles are selectively handed out. Otherwise, her bounty spills freely upon all. You guessed it. I don't like her. It's not sour grapes. I'm too much older. I'm not in the game. But she's definitely a player. She scours the room with her diamond-hard eyes and chooses her next victim. Then she sets her trap and lures him in steadily and remorselessly. The Jane plays the foil, showing up the other's radiant beauty by her own plain looks. At the end of the evening, the tigress strides away with her claws hooked into yet another unsuspecting fellow, who's convinced himself she genuinely thinks the sun rises out of him. And the Jane wends her lonely way home, I guess. The tigress has a favorite type. She likes them broad and stocky, muscle-bound, even chubby, but never taller than herself in her towering heels. If she has to look up to a guy, he's gone, even if he checks all the other boxes. She's also partial to curly hair, often running her long, lean fingers through it, which I've come to recognize is her mark of high favor. That's the usual scenario. But today, Something's out of whack. The Jane has been whispering urgently to the tigress. Her eyes are big and startled. The Jane's, I mean. I can see even from across the room. She's been pointing subtly with her chin to a group of young men who've just captured a table near mine. A casual glance confirms that none of them fits the tigress's type. So what's afoot? The tigress has been turning around and staring blatantly at the group. Then leaning into the Jane and having whispered confabulations. Then the tigress turns around again. Once, twice, even thrice. Naturally, it doesn't pass unnoticed. I pick it up early, but even this batch of boys intent on fun can't miss it. They discuss it amongst themselves. And in the usual young man way, some of them are preening for her, when I hear a loud gasp from their table. A chair overturns, and one chap, silken-haired, tall as the rafters and slender as a whippet, bolts upright in obvious shock, exclaims in a voice loud enough to be audible over the buzz and clatter of the room, "Is that you, Danny?" His table falls to silence, as do the two girls at the bar. His long legs cross the room in swift strides, and barreling past the tigress, he reaches out with both hands for the Jane. He plucks her off the bar stool as if she were a tiny rag doll, spins her around in the confined space, puts her down, and pulls her into his tight embrace the next instant. I can only see his back, but I catch a glimpse of her face. And I've never seen so much sunshine in one face before, I tell you truly. Or so much thunder in the tigress's. Someone has been upstaged and is mighty miffed. As I watch, she rearranges her features and puts her party face back on, and by the time Lanky and the Jane turn to her, she's got a welcoming smile ready in place. Introductions are made, I guess, and Lanky invites them to join his friends, but they decline. So he comes back to his friends and explains, "I eavesdrop shamelessly. She's an old friend from way back when, and they're hesitant to join such a big group. Could they let him off tonight so he could spend some time with her?" Apologies from him and some broad teasing from them, but yes, of course he can. And off he goes back to the bar where the girls have wangled a seat for him. Lanky has eyes only for the Jane, or Danny, as he called her. She keeps trying to include her friend in the conversation, and while he plays along a bit, his attention always drifts back to the Jane. He's evidently proof against the tigress's particular brand of charms, to which she is not taking favorably. Since Lanky is, well, lanky, he's not her type. And normally, she'd have flicked him away even if he came to her on bended knee. But for him to ignore her, oh ho ho, that's quite a different kettle of fish. She does not appreciate being passed over with such scant courtesy. The Jane sees it unraveling before her eyes and tries her best to avert disaster. But she's too conditioned to playing the sidekick and doesn't know how to take charge. And Lanky is absolutely unaware of what's going on. He's just rediscovered, guessing from his wild reaction on sight of her, the girl of his dreams, and he has eyes and ears for nothing and nobody else. The tension is so thick, I can almost feel it. Yet nobody else seems to notice or to care. Not Lanky's friends, or the barman, or the waitress, or any other customers. Just the three of them at the bar counter, imminently reaching explosion point, and me in my usual chair by the open window, with the warm night air spilling over one side of my body and the sweet fragrance of the flowers completely overpowered by the musky scent of betrayal. Someone needs to do something, or the Jane will be swept away, her small claim of happiness overcome by the other one's grab for supremacy. Unthinkingly, I power out of my chair and close the gap to the bar in a few hurried steps. Lanky is facing me, and the other two have their backs to me. I reach out and insinuate my arm between the Jane and the tigress as if to reach the bar counter. I turn innocently to the tigress and smile apologetically at her for the intrusion. And the switch in her is so sharp, I almost fall down in shock. She goes from burning hot to cool calculation in the blink of an eye. She's instantly a tigress on the prowl, and just like that, I'm her new target. It's only then that it strikes me that I, graying at the temples and running to paunch though I am, perfectly fit her prototype. In the minutes it takes for me to realize I've unwittingly made myself her new prey, the other two have melted away, and I'm left here with the tigress and her ruby lips, her smiling eyes, and her long fingers reaching out enticingly to tangle in my silvering curls. I decided to be the hero and charged in like a chivalrous knight to distract the tigress and give the budding flower of romance between Lanky and the Jane a chance to bloom. And now I find myself riding a tiger. And the only thought in my head is that I hope I can bloody well get off and somehow come out of this alive.